Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts on Q live on a Saturday morning, as we always are, with zero technical difficulties, but we are here. And I'm happy to be with hopefully video that doesn't freeze anymore because I replaced hardware and now the entire thing is ran through an LLM for all of it. Actually, speaking of which, that thumbnail I am so proud of. Like, our cartoons are now configurable by anyone online to do anything they want with.
Probably hang us for using AI generated thumbnails, but also at the same time, this is not a professional operation. I mean, no, hold on. We're consummate professionals. Every Saturday at 11 o'clock, we're never late, especially not 5 minutes.
The thing which I will, again, this is one of the topics, but I was amazed because typically I'll generate something and then modify it and then put our faces on it and things like that. Here OpenAI came out with their new way where you can modify it, and I just plopped our cartoons in there. And by the way, the first ones like we generated were like horribly, horribly cursed. And then it got better, and then it made me fat. And I have now recognized the fact that I am not working out nearly as much as I should be because we're stuck in this office.
So it just made it more accurate then.
It absolutely did. All right. Today we start. Last we saw our superheroes. We were talking about New Year's resolutions, and one of yours was to imbue into yourself the ability to vibe code.
Oh God!
And you have set on this journey where now all your code is vibe coded. That's not true. But
well. Actually, one of my ones was to buy a new USB-C KVM so I could stop physically unplugging the interfaces for these cameras and wearing the interactions out. So I have accomplished that. I think you should make small goals for yourself that are very accomplishable so that you can put them on your resume and show that you're accomplished. And buying a KVM is a accomplishment for me. So that's done. But yes.
Braden added clearly a comment which needs
to
be read.
Which one is which? It's the hostess with the mostess and their sexy hacker sidekick.
Thank you. So you've accomplished your KVM, and now you're vibe coding.
So I spent all last year shitting on LLMs and code generation because in the times that I have used it, and don't get me wrong, I spend for things like one-time scripts, and I'm describing myself for last year, for things like one-time scripts and data processing, things like that, stuff that's easily verifiable. I'm like, I just need a script that will run some set of programs in a loop. Give me that. I don't want to spend 20 minutes debugging stupid bash syntax issues. That's what I used it for. But I never really used it aggressively to try and generate like actually important code. And the example I'll use is like any amount of kernel code. And in fact, like there's a lot of poo-pooing going on upstream in kernel work as to whether or not or how LLM generated kernel code should be allowed. If it should, if it shouldn't, if it's all shit code, if it's blah, blah. I wanted to put it to the test to determine exactly what the limits are on it producing reliable, like simple code that humans can actually reason about in patch structured form that actually accomplish a discrete goal, something that I understand very well. And I know what the end point looks like how much do I have to fight with the system given very clear requirements to get what I want. And so I said at the beginning of the year, I'm just going to lean in and I'm going to approach this from a test-driven approach, which is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to write a QEMU testing apparatus so that it can write tests by itself and then run a new kernel in KVM and stop short of having it debug the kernel. If it doesn't work on the first run, like abandon hope, right? Like if it produces code that blows the kernel up on boot, abandon ship. Like that's just, that means I can't trust anything it produces, period. But if it can go back and forth and get it to actually produce runnable code and testable code and tests that are feasible, then I can start to look at this and say, like, okay, automating away the testing process is actually really nice as long as I can validate the tests are reasonable tests, and they should
Mhm.
be. That should be an easy problem to answer. The hard problem is I'm going to give it code design questions that are very vague. I want to accomplish, an example. This I didn't use this exact problem, but like I want to write a driver that is given an interrupt from a piece of hardware and then does something with that interrupt. Can you give me that scaffolding? Like, this is pretty standard code all across the kernel, and that means in theory it should be able to provide the scaffolding, and then I can go in and tweak, and I should be able to produce that and then have it automate testing back and forth. So I leaned really hard into, here's a discrete problem that I know how to solve. Let's see what it does. And I've learned 2 or 3 things. One, it does in this case, I'm using Claude Opus, I think. I think we're using Opus, but yeah, I've been using Claude. One, it's a lot better than I expected. A lot better. To the extent that, like, this is the type of code I would expect a junior engineer to produce on average, like a talented junior engineer that knows a lot of things. But also that's like a double-edged sword. One, it uses a lot of techniques that seasoned engineers use, but two, it doesn't reason about why it uses those techniques.
Mhm.
And so it trends towards overly complex and what's the way to put it? Extremely like safety conservative code, where like it uses locking mechanisms and it uses various it's hard to programming patterns that are trying to solve problems that don't even exist. Like it's solving a problem that I didn't give it. It thinks it needs to use a particular technique because it thinks something like a race condition may occur. And so this is, and I was able to point at this, which is like, oh, I had a huge patch set. It was way too complex. And I slowly shrank it down to the bare minimum that it actually needed to accomplish the problem. And I had to ask 2 questions. One, is this any better than what a junior engineer would do? And the answer is probably no, because the overly complex solution uses a bunch of things that a junior engineer probably wouldn't even know to use or think about using because they've never been exposed to it. And 2, the reduction process, and this is the title of the stream. The reduction process made me feel like my job was to be an AI code generator's verifier. And I had to ask the question, would I have come to this simpler solution faster had I never used the LLM in the first place? And I think the answer to that question is actually no. I don't think I would have come to the conclusion faster. But would a junior engineer have fallen in the pit and not have been able to get there? I think absolutely. And this is that valley problem we've talked on for a really long time, which is the only reason I was able to get to the simpler solution is because I knew what it was supposed to look like from the beginning. And that comes from a long career of seeing a lot of bad code, essentially, and knowing what to avoid. The average engineer is not going to have that, or like not the average engineer. The average junior engineer is not going to have that. So the idea that you're going to replace some set of junior engineers with this, I think, is an extremely short-sighted. I still think that's an extremely short-sighted perspective to take. At the same time, hearkening back to all the interviews we did with the AI Cyber Challenge people, who all said consistently it's way better than any of us expected it to be. I also think that is true, but I think it's only true in capable hands, not in like junior engineer hands. And we'll have more to talk about this. going on. But what do you think about my feedback there?
There's two things I wrote down. One, oh gosh, it's two pieces. One of the things you started talking about was it didn't have, I want to say, the overall context. Like it didn't have, I'm trying to fix this thing, and it didn't know about because of this huge patch set. And the example I can give is one of the things I'm working on is this Sherlock agent. So we have Baker Street, which I created, and it's a GARP orchestration platform. And the agent, well, the implant, whatever you want to call it, for pen testing and security testing, we use it for everything. It's a remote control. That piece, I had a really interesting problem. So like for anyone who's talked about it, I'm using a very, very fun way of communicating with these implants, which I haven't really seen out there. I've seen it in a couple APTs, like advanced persistent threat, like nation state attacks, using the RTP protocol. Effectively, like the thing we're talking over right now, which is really good for video, it can be used for data, but no one really uses it. And I had this idea of like, ooh, I can open up a remote terminal. I can open up, use term.js and run a terminal inside my browser and connect it over to this. Yet the problem I ran into is every time I resized it on the browser, it wouldn't resize the pseudo terminal way on the other side. So I would, the text would rewrite and whatnot. And I did the most terrifying thing. And this is kind of what you're saying. Instead of like going, because I couldn't figure out the problem, because I've used the phrase where we're going, we don't have routes. Where we're going, no one's done this before, so there's nothing to model it on. And I was trying to, how do I get this resizing? And I asked ChatGPT, I said, how can I do this? And it came up with like 50 wrong solutions. And I was bashing my face. And I had no idea where to go with it. So what did I do? I made a new folder, bought both of my repositories, and because the agent is one repo, and then the back end was another repo. And I was like, great, now you have control over everything. go figure out this problem. And it took it a few attempts. And eventually it did, not getting into the details effectively, it's like, oh, you can't send this over the data channel. You legitimately have to break the data channel, send raw stream across, read the raw stream, decode that, grab your JSON file, which is doing the resizing, and then reconnect the data channel. Like, makes zero sense why. I'm sure someone smarter than me could figure it out. Even asking ChatGPT to explain why that was the fix, reading through it going, I mostly understand it, but sure, it works now. And this was kind of hit me as this weird extreme scenario of like, oh, for it to solve these problems, I need to give it more and more and more access to more and more and more code. But that solves a problem I didn't know how to fix. The extreme side of this was I had this idea to make this almost kind of inspired by the AICC challenge, like a POV generator. Is I can feed all of these report tools into it. It can make POVs, proof of vulnerability, and I can run those proof of vulnerabilities in like a very specific format, and I could hand those into a Docker container, and it can go just check to see if it's still vulnerable. That project, I completely just vibe coded. And what I have found is that if you vibe code from the start your project, and build out, like there's so many different formats for it. This agents.md, it's a markdown file which articulates what you're trying to do, and you continually have the AI kind of like configure it. It's like, here is your guiding principle. I think there's even guidelines.markdown, but effectively, here are my guiding principles for this project. Go read that and then do your thing. What I'm finding is if you vibe code from the start, it's really good at continuing the vibe code. Where if you introduce it to your other project, you have to spend tons and tons and tons of time making sure it has very good guidelines, that it has, it knows what code is where, it has all the different connection points. You have to put it on the highest level of reasoning. And I'm finding this break in vibe coding where it's just like, it's very helpful in some projects, but and then other projects, it's completely horrible. And then other ones where it was there from the start, it's really good.
So I'll pick on a couple things that you said. One, I want to point out that you at one point you asked it to explain its reasoning. I think that kind of interaction is a fundamental mistake that engineers get caught up in. Um, like, I think it's okay to do that, but you have to look at answers from questions like those with like extreme suspicion, because you have to remember what the thing does. It generates the next token in the predictive set, right? So like outsourcing. So what you did in that process is you're outsourcing your reasoning process for why a certain design was chosen, right? It chose a design and then it provided you a reason. You did not start from a reason and then choose your design. Like, you didn't start from a requirement and then choose the design. It chose a solution and then told you, here's the reason why I did that. It's completely backwards. And I think for the average engineer, like at the end of the day, like if the software works, that's the ultimate like measure of success. Like that's what you learn in just about every software, like proper software lifecycle class, is like the goal of success is that your stuff works and you don't get sued for it. So like if at the end of the day you hit that and it's not creating like bottlenecks and other problems, then like whatever, just ship it, right? But if your standard interaction is solve a problem and then tell me why you solved it that way, it's quite backwards. And I actually find myself doing the opposite, which is I give it specific requirements, it produces code, and then I kill that context and I open a new context and I say, review this code. And it tells me why that code is bad. And I'm like, this is a really interesting way to do this. And then at the end of it, I look at the code and I say, okay, these design decisions were bad. And then I'll open a new context and say, change this design decision to this design decision. Here's the reasoning behind it. And it'll go do it. But the important part is I'm injecting the reasoning before it makes that decision.
So what you're saying right here is currently it's actually kind of old right now, is this is the next iteration of vibe coding. This was the whole concept of agents. Instead of you manually creating these other contexts exist and you're feeding it between one and the other. You're saying, all right, you're the reviewer of this code, now do this.
And then we should probably get off this, and I'll point this out, like the hard part about that is if you just do that, you are removing the human aspect from what you are doing. And everything that we're building is intended for humans. You are trying to solve some human problem. You are trying to sell more ice cream, to use your example, right? Ben and Jerry's is trying to sell more ice cream. If you have a self-reasoning, like if you built, we'll just call it a sentient system, it's no longer a human problem-solving machine. It's its own thing. Right? Like, so like when you remove the human reasoning as to why we should do something from the process, you break the relationship to, I want to sell more ice cream as the core directive, I guess, if you want to put it that way. I don't know if that made sense. Did that make sense?
It did. I mean, ultimately you're saying you're trying to solve human problems, and it comes down to creativity. Is LLMs are not going to be creative. They're not going to be the ones to come up with, here is the problem I know that needs to be solved, and then program around it. You're still feeding it into, here is what I want you to do. You can't give it saying, hey, go look at my system and find problems, because it will find, example, I have water going across a path. Here, go find problems and solve it. It's going to go, oh, well, you need a bridge, and you need railing, and you need railing to hold on to, and you need a ticketing system and one of those little metal things that stop people from going through too fast. Like, it's like, no, it's a trail next to my house. I just maybe put some rocks over the water. Like, and I think it's going to lack that creativity because it doesn't understand the problem you're trying to solve.
I think it's actually more fundamental, right? Like, the reason why we oftentimes latch onto this like senior versus junior engineer aspect is quite simply the more senior you get, the less code you write. And the reason why is because you spend more of your time trying to figure out what code to write than you spend actually writing code. Because if I spend 90% of my time determining what code has to be written and then 10% of my time just executing the clear code that solves the set of problems I collected requirements for, that will be far more efficient than just bumbling in the dark and solving every random problem, building a bridge, all these things, right? Like that's what you've just described. And so like, this is why like the pipeline for engineers from junior to senior is typically a junior engineer comes in and you give them discrete problems to solve, depending on where they land in capability. And then as they get more senior, you give them vague problems where you're like, a thing doesn't work, go figure out why and solve problems. And then that person has to go work autonomously to collect feedback from people and their experiences, figure out what problems they're trying to solve, and then synthesize a solution to like large context issues that can't be described in a simple set of requirements. And trying to dig out like what is the core fundamental issue. I think LLMs are like fundamentally bad at that. Like, and part of it is just like you just like it can't go talk to the contexts are not big enough. Like this is what I describe as like months or years worth of work.
So here's the thing I start thinking about. I can't remember what is the principle of learning where you go through this peak in the beginning where you know enough and you think you know everything, and then your education goes whatever that. Do you remember what it is? What's it called?
No, I forget.
While you're looking that up, I can't help but think LLMs are at that first peak. And the reason I say this is because there's solutions that we're starting to put in place, and the industry is starting to put in place for how to fix this. But effectively, what LLMs are is they are the smart talker. I'm looking at Gowry's. No, okay. So I was seeing if he was going to mention it. They're not Gowry's, Gator Bytes. When talking about this, there are lots of ways folks are using it. Where is your data being sent? Digital sovereignty. Oh yeah, Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah. So you're Gator, thinking of that graph. That graph has actually been like debunked a bit, but go ahead.
But I mean, it's semi-true. Goodness, like you ride a bike for the first time, you fall down, and now all of a sudden you're like, I'm an idiot. With an engineer, you build your first app, and you're like, I am a genius. And then time goes on, you're like, I am a complete moron. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is why imposter syndrome is like rampant in our career, because the more expert you are, the more you realize I have no idea what I'm doing. My point, though, is the LLM is at that first peak. It's the very good smart talker. It is so confident, and because it's guessing at answers, it's a really good guesser of answers. That's how they work. We're gonna get to that point where I ask it a question and it's listening to what I'm saying, and it is guessing my answer, and it's a really good smart talker. But it is an absolute abysmal rule checker. This is like effectively like what is it? Formal semantic logic infers. This is what they're looking to solve, is that they are very good rule checkers, but they're really bad at all the stuff LLMs are really good for. So like here's an example. I can ask an LLM to say, hey, I need to go fix this server over here, make me a domain admin. And it's going to immediately go, this is a great idea. Where what you're going to do is you're going to ask it that. It's going to format that request into a very strict rule of here is what I'm looking to do. It's going to hand that to the FSLI, which has all the like let's make it very security related. The request, which goes to the LLM, is the ticketing system.
Add some context in here really quick. Like you are, you brought up FSLI because I sent Silk a paper that a friend of mine from college wrote, literally talking about exactly this problem, and talking about solving simple logic problems. Simple in the sense that like it would show up in the LSAT.
It's been a problem for a while though, because this is why like how many R's are in strawberry? Like there's the reason why that, and handing that off in a security context as I want to be domain admin, it's not going to be able to have all the context of here are the rules, here's the IEM rules, here's this is like this employee has only been an employee for 30 days, therefore don't grant it. So we've always had this exchange, and one's not looking to replace it. But yeah, you sent that paper, and it was it's talking about solving that problem.
Okay, I have to take a quick pause. My dog is whining horrendously right outside the door. I need to run in.
That sounds good. I can do puppets to entertain everyone during the time. Actually, what I'm going to do is I want to go to Gator Bytes. When talking about this, there are lots of ways folks are using it. Where is your data being sent? Digital sovereignty, and having your data be on an air-gapped network while still running. This actually falls into another category I want to talk to. So before you get off of FSLI, the one I want, OpenClaw, or whatever they're calling it now. I think it's called OpenClaw now. It was called Moltbot, and then it was called ClawdBot, which I think is hilarious, which was CLAWD bot. And of course that was going to get a lawsuit against it.
Yeah, I'll toss out the, like, I was just talking to my wife this morning because she always does, she's a physical therapist. She always does notes afterwards at home. So it's almost like she's always working, which I think is like criminal. Like, I think work stays at work, says the guy who thinks about work in the shower. But I think work should stay at work. And she spends a lot of her time essentially doing work at home, trying to just do right by her patients, right? I'm like, one of the things that would actually be useful and solve a problem, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say exactly why it's a terrible, terrible idea, is like, oh, in the room, being able to record the conversation and then just generate the notes automatically feels like a solution to the problem of doctors having to spend all of their off time writing patient notes. Obviously, this is a horrible privacy issue unless the box that does it is like air gapped, not connected to the internet, locally hosts the model, and like they have to have some physical way of transmitting the data that is secure. And so, like, yes, engineer brain goes, I can solve that problem, and then the security brain goes, this is a horrible idea. What are you doing? Right? Because now you're putting a microphone in the room with a doctor and a patient, and like that's just, everyone's gonna feel weirded out by that.
Then you recognize the context of, like, there's no such thing as an air gap machine. Like, don't get me wrong. Yes, there is a concept of it, but you're gonna take those notes, and where are you gonna put them? You're going to have a backup somewhere. Yeah. You're definitely going to have the backup off-site. You're not going to physically move the backup off-site. You're going to send it over the wire. You're going to write those documents in Microsoft Word, because you're not going to write them by hand. You're probably going to write them in Microsoft Word, which has
its own LLM, which
has its own Copilot. But even if it doesn't have any of that, you're still installing updates, or you're running an old version. So, like, don't get me wrong, it exists. I think we're going to come up with more nuanced ways to solve some of the privacy issues. Like, we've already started moving towards this, like, enigmatizing the data, like GDPR within Europe and whatnot. Like, we've had this concept before.
I'm going to toss it out like this. In this sense, I don't see the difference between, there's one key difference, but I don't see the difference between sending your data to a random LLM model and just like sending it to a random function on a random server in somebody's data center. It's all just software under the hood crunching numbers in some way, with the exception that if you ingest that data for learning, you have now encoded it into the model in some way, right? And that is a problem. That is a fundamental issue. But at the end of the day, if you send data to someone else's server, you have the exact same problem between running inference and running some other random, any other code. So I don't see LLMs to be particularly novel in that sense, I guess. It's, as Gator said, it's all just someone else's computer. And that is the fundamental issue of, like, right now, someone else's computer is some wildly expensive GPU-based system sitting in a data center somewhere. Right. I think as we're able to create less expensive, locally hosted solutions that you can have strong controls over data privacy and what actually gets exposed to the internet, I think we'll start to find some of those applications. But it's not going to be in ways that people think right now. Like the description of my problem where it's like auto generating notes from conversations. This is probably the only useful, not the only useful, because I just described code generation. But for the average person, that's a legitimately useful thing for certain sets of society. Doctors generating notes. But the problem is the human aspect of putting a microphone in a doctor's office is like terrifying.
I mean, I also asked, like, I think of like, what was it, Teams, Microsoft Teams, where they are now like auto doing notes. All it means is one of two things: either people are now not paying attention to the meeting because the notes are going to be generated, or no one's looking at the notes because no one's going to read those notes anyway.
Or, and like I just said, or people don't talk as freely because they know it's all being recorded and summarized.
I will say I have found there is a squirrel at my window. I was distracted by a squirrel. That's terrifying. The I have windows in my office now, or a window in my office. It's fascinating. The I had a train of thought. Oh yeah, but it's the moment. Yeah, the moment you start recording, it does. Everyone kind of shuts down, and that's always been the case because you have to hedge. You start hedging your language, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, who's going to listen to this?" And then you realize no one's listening to it anyway.
I do want to get back to FSLI because I think this is interesting, and I think you should give it a proper introduction instead of just starting to talk about it with no context.
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, a friend of mine sent me a paper she published. Just working on her PhD, and it's named FSLI, an interpretable formal semantic system for one-dimensional ordering inference. And I'm going to do her the horrible injustice of trying to summarize the paper as I understood it after talking with her a little bit. But the long and short of it is they took, her team took, her team took a bunch of logical deduction problems. The example right in the beginning is, on a branch there are 3 birds, a raven, a quail, and a crow. The quail is leftmost. The raven is rightmost. Here's a multiple choice, A, B, C, D. What is true? The crow is in the middle is true because raven is leftmost and quail is leftmost and raven is rightmost. This is a simple logical deduction problem. And for the average person looking at this example, it's like really, really easy. As it turns out, LLMs traditionally have struggled with this kind of problem because, to put it bluntly, they don't reason. They predict an answer, right? And some models now are, quote unquote, reasoning models. I think the one they use in as the pinnacle of this right now is like the O1 preview, are doing better at solving these problems, but they're not 100% accurate. And so the goal with implementing this system was to use more traditional natural language processing and logic processing, basically theorem proving methods to show that you can produce a 100% reliable solution to certain sets of complexity of this type of problem. And then at a certain point, the space explodes so that like it becomes a computational issue, it becomes a computational issue. Like you just don't have enough memory to work through all of the things. And so like there's a graph in there that shows that just about every LLM, with the exception of O1, just crashes and burns as soon as the complexity gets above like incredibly trivial. And then a solution like this, which is more discrete, has 100% accuracy up until a certain complexity, and then it falls off, but not at the rate that LLMs do. And one of the things that I pointed out, and I said this a little earlier, is that this really goes to explain something that I think we all intuitively know, but don't know how to express. The language I would use to describe it is that this system actually reasons about the logical problem it's being presented and produces an answer based on a set of lemmas and theorems and, like actual logical rules, while LLMs look at the problem as a whole and try to intuit an answer, right? This would be, an expert in a field looking at a shape of a problem and going, it's probably solved like this, but not looking at any of the details. And this system actually looking at all the fine details. And that seems like a really useful way to explain to people in layman's terms the downsides of LLMs, which is what you said earlier, that Dunning-Kruger graph is exactly that.
Yeah, I think the one kicker is this isn't these are not a solution to you're effectively picking the one weak point of an LLM and you're saying this solves it, but I don't these things aren't they're two sides of the coin.
I don't think the paper claims that.
Yeah, that's what
I'm not saying one weakness. It's actually just demonstrating that attempting to solve certain kinds of problem. I think it asks the questions, why would you use an inferior mechanism to solve a problem that we already have methods to solve?
Well, that's the pieces. I think these are two sides of a coin: understanding and correctness. Like smart. So this is understanding versus correctness. The LLM would be working through understanding. The FSLI that's looking at correctness. Legos, for example. The LLM's job would be looking at the Lego and understanding, okay, here is conceptually what they're looking to make. This is the color scheme. Here's how you can make a dragon, and here's what a dragon looks like, and it does that. Where the other system is meant to go, logically, how do you build this? The rules of Legos dictate that you build the bottom first, and Legos connect this way because it is given the understanding when you build this out to build around very, very strict rules. Here's how Legos work. Here's how they go together. The bottom needs to go on before the top goes on. If you solve a puzzle, the best way to do it is to sort it into piles of similar colors or edge pieces, or where one is the smart talk. They're both needed. The smart talker is needed to be there. And then the person who knows generally, like I'm going to say it, the smart talker, and then one kid reads the instructions, the other kid checks the rules of Lego, and then together they can build the thing. These are not necessarily mutually exclusive where you use one or the other. They're meant to work together.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think. She points out that like this is not intended to replace an LLM. That's not the point.
Let the LLM. I was going to say, let the LLM read and talk, and let this prove the math.
I mean, you're really just describing the LLM as a sycophantic business wonk that makes poor decisions all day.
Tell me how that is wrong.
I'm not. I'm just saying that, like, why would anyone want that?
Well, because the rule checker is not going to have the context or the understanding to have any level of understanding or creativity outside of what it's been programmed. Using the example of putting birds in a row, or the logic is, it's going to understand if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A must be bigger than C.
So I think you're stretching the conclusion here a bit far, right? I think like you go like, oh, it's collecting this and I need to do X, Y, and Z. I read all the rules and then I hand this off to the thing that actually understands how to execute a set of rules. I think you've missed a key observation in there, which is when a human hands, you can view every prompt that you put into an LLM as a logic puzzle. Do you get where I'm going with this yet?
No.
Every prompt that you hand an LLM is itself a logic puzzle. And some of them are going to be well written, and some of them are going to be poorly written. The logic puzzles written in the LSAT example, this is the law school test that has a bunch of logic problems that is like the bird ordering, but like much more difficult. You're giving the LLM a set of requirements, and they will not be as well formed as an LSAT logic puzzle is formed. Right? And so as a result, if you have to ask the question, if the logic puzzle is is malformed, how can the accuracy of a system that fails to do simple logic problems, how can you depend on it to deal with large logic problems? Like if it fails on simple stuff, how can it do large stuff reliably? Now, like, this is where we get into accuracy. Oh, the LLM's accuracy is 30% or 40% or 50%. But like, at what point in that gradient does it become useful, and can and we'll say not uneducated is the wrong word, an unskilled or an untrained person actually use this in a useful manner? Like, we use the junior engineer case. Like, at what level of accuracy can you hand something to a junior engineer and expect them to be more proficient rather than spend time fighting against a thing that is producing garbage because you gave it poor requirements, because the average person is not going to give it LSAT quality problems? Are you following what I'm saying?
Not really. Like, I understand what you're. I think I get what you're driving at, but they solve LLMs and FSLI solve problems in very different ways. One is guessing at the answer. And then the other one is inferring logic. Again, they're going to be good at very different things.
So let me put it this way. Going back to your example where you said, I was using, I don't know if you were using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and you were like, ingest my code, and I'm trying to fix this problem, go fix it. The first thing that the model will do is it'll go pull up all of the relevant code that you pointed it at, it'll read it, and then it will generate itself in the background, in its own context, a set of rules that it needs to follow that is itself a logic problem. But if we already showed that the accuracy of the LLMs solving logic problem is low, how can you rely on that generation step to produce a quality question that it will be able to answer?
And this is why I'm saying these things go hand in hand. Is by the time it makes those rules, if we have built something which has those rules in it and can then start doing all the logic inference, that's where these things need to go. Is the logic inference isn't going to help with creating that initial list of rules. It's then going to be able to. This is where these things hand off. One's very good at understanding and saying, "Here's the context. Here's what I need to grab," and all of that. The other system's going to be very good. So that is, I think, the next iteration is these things working hand in hand.
And I'm gonna now tie this back to the title of the podcast, which is, "Are we just AI validators now?" Right? Like what you've just described is what I described in the beginning, which is I'm going to lean into vibe coding and see how this goes. Just to, like, I need to run this experiment. If I'm going to say that these things are bad or good or whatever, I need to have actively engaged in these things. And what you have just described is what I experienced over the last month, which is I give it a set of problems. It fails to, it has a logic failure somewhere. And then I have to go give it a new rule. And at a certain point, the context is too big, so it does compaction and it loses context, it loses rules, and it starts failing. And so you have to have new sessions and blah, blah, blah. And that's the mechanics of it. But like, I'm operating as the FSLI that is supposed to be providing the baseline for reason.
So how is this any different than test-driven development? You build the test.
Yeah.
You build the test and then tell the LLM to go solve this. Go solve until the unit test is complete.
Well, because everyone's using the LLM to write the tests,
and
not thinking about
true.
and not thinking about whether the tests are valid.
I always laugh. I always think about the prime problem, which is as you approach infinity, there's less and less prime numbers. So if you want to have the fastest solution for numbers approaching infinity, you can just say, is this a prime number? And just always answer false. Because it will be 99.9% accurate as it approaches infinity.
No, wrong.
How so?
Wrong. Because your logic around thinking about infinity as a concept is fundamentally wrong. There are both an infinite number of non-prime numbers and an infinite number of prime numbers.
When you solve starting
false.
at zero, hold on. When you start solving at zero, as you approach infinity, prime numbers get farther and farther apart. So
true. But that doesn't mean there's fewer.
Fine.
There are an
semantics
number
aside,
of,
when you're writing
a
piece.
Aside.
Okay, here.
We're talking about logic problems. You just failed logic. Semantics aside.
This is my point, though. You're making my point for me. My point is very simply is when you write a function to detect prime numbers and the number starts at zero, if you always return false as it calculates, is zero a number? Divide by 2, check a remainder, divide by itself, divide by all the numbers in between. Like when you write that software, it was shown LLM is going to respond with always, if you want a 99.9% accuracy at going from zero to infinity, it will be 99.9% accurate if you just always return false. This is the logic problem which LLM is going to fail at, in something which does true validation is going to succeed at, because FSLIs are going to return false regardless. There's no guesswork involved.
Like what you're actually doing is injecting the human perspective of reasoning about infinity on discrete computer systems is an infeasible thing, and so you can't have infinity on a computer. You have a bit limit. Right. And so you can give a discrete answer for how do I generate or how do I detect if a particular number is prime on this computer based on
if you want to be into the details of the code, I'm using a reason of saying, like, if I say I want a function to be 99.99% accurate for a prime number, I can always return false because a computer, when it counts up. Now, if I just say randomly generate a number between 1 and a gazillion.
Your statement here is basically making the claim that LLMs are fundamentally flawed in the logical domain. I
am making the claim saying if you are going to ask an LLM to say, generate me a function that determines a prime number, you sure as better plan for giving it a reason in the general context of what the problem I'm looking to solve is so that it will understand it. It's a fundamental theme of every technology.
Braden says return false is the fundamental theme of every technology initiated apocalypse movie. I want to hear the reasoning behind this, but it is funny on its face.
Oh goodness. And then Gator threw out a squirrel of the time down and the countdown to DEF CON.
Oh goodness. DEF CON 34. Man, I'm getting old.
It is. You've gotten your flight. I'm still waiting for mine to come down in price.
Yeah. They changed my flight out from under me. I had a lay flat on the way out there, and now I have a normal first class seat. Yeah, I'm flying first class. I have
normie first class.
I'm a normie now. Yeah. I'm springing for first class just because the ticket actually isn't too expensive. I was surprised by that, but you have to book it so far out.
Yeah, mine is ranging in price to like triple what it normally was last year to all the way down. I'm waiting. It needs to drop. It just needs to drop. Then I'm booking. I was asked, what is our plan for DEF CON this year?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's a very good question. I'm actually asking, like, how young is too young to bring my daughter to DEF CON? Pretty sure a year old is too young.
Year old,
maybe
is
like
too young.
3 or 4 will be fun.
The one I'm struggling with is my daughter wants to go, and I'd love to have her there, but it's a very different DEF CON the moment you bring your child.
Yeah.
Like you can't do, even just simply, I can't go and take photos at 1 a.m. Not that we can now because the con shuts down.
Unless you have a babysitter.
That is true. So are you available during the hours of 6 to midnight? The only other topic I had was OpenClaw. Have you looked into this at all?
I haven't. I saw the article that says like I ship code without reading it, and I've been using OpenClaw aggressively, and I was like, this is a terrible idea. But also, I guess it's not a terrible idea depending on what the product is. Like if your product is make a thing that doesn't process any sensitive data, then yeah, vibe away, man. I don't care.
So here's the kicker. So OpenClaw, I've started looking into it because this is like the first open source project recently I've looked at where I'm like, ooh, I really kind of want to run this. But then when I looked at it and saw how other people were using it, it is terrifying. So high level, I think the way he originally wanted to build this thing, he built it like a day, and it's grown like, I think it has just as many stars as TypeScript has on GitHub, in where they go back like 10 years. His goes back like a weekend and is now like just as many stars. But he wanted to make a way of interacting with LLMs through WhatsApp or through Telegram or any Signal, iMessage, insert whatever, so that you can run it. It's not running your own models locally, though now they've added it where you can add your own models, but that you can interact with it using Discord or it's your middle layer. It's like the thing which bridges this. The thing which was terrifying is the thing which made it where I think all the Mac Minis sold out like across the States because everyone's like, oh, I could run it on a Mac Mini. The reason why was because then you can run it with iMessage. So if you run the software on, it gets worse. On a Mac Mini, you can run it where you could interact with it over iMessage. Very cool, very fun, totally a great idea. The kicker is people were using their own iCloud accounts with it. So you log in with iCloud, give this access, and people don't realize how much like the security vulnerabilities and write-ups I've been seeing of it are utterly hilarious. Because like security within prompts is unsolved. It is not solved yet. Every single app we test,
I'm convinced it's not solvable.
Like example, every single app we have tested, period, we have found prompt injection in. Everything we have tested online, but I have two guys who do bug bounty. Both of them have found vulnerabilities. And I think the funniest one, by the way, was there was this one's publicly disclosed at this point. It was a travel chat bot, and they wanted to see if you could create bias, and they put all these ways of putting bias out. But if you put like an emoji of the country's flag in, it would then only give recommendations in that country. So you could give like you could do a Switzerland emoji flag, and then all of its recommendations would always be Switzerland. So like this was example of like just weird obscure things. But going to my point is they would put their iMessage on here, and there was a vulnerability where you could then do prompt injection. So everyone's like, okay, cool. So you can do stuff with like their data or something like that. No, you're messaging on behalf of their iMessage user. So their iMessage, because it's now a text translator and almost a lot of the two-factor go over it, you can now start resetting banking passwords. Like everything you can do with your phone, you can do. But the best one by far is that people have created so many add-ons to OpenClaw that one of them was a one password API. So you can now get into the password vault to dump all the other passwords out of it. And what I found,
I had an immediate question. I'm going to inject it. I was like, oh, well, then you just give it its own account. And I'm like, you know what's funny though? That immediately probably just neuters it as a whole.
Yeah.
To become not useful. And so it's like, wow, that's an unsolvable problem.
And it came down, this is where I started all the way, was like, in order for me to solve my problem with my software, I had to give it more access to be able to see two repositories. Now this is local and all of that. But in order to make this thing really, really great and really, really fun, because people have set it up to do like read my email, check stocks, do the weather, send updates, go into Discord and respond on my behalf to people. So they give it their Discord accounts. But the moment you give it that much access, if there's a single vulnerability, and that is my fear with so many of these new upstart things, is none of the security is taking, people are installing this thing, giving it full access to all of their accounts, not realizing and here's the thing. This is the one that blows me away, is that with one prompt, you could imagine a prompt. You have all the time in the world with access to everyone's data. What prompt could you do to absolutely wreck their life? Grab my entire iCloud photo album for some people and publicly post it on X. Because if you give it access, that's not even a difficult thing for it to do. And go grab all my personal photos, put them online. Grab all my day one journal entries, throw those online. Grab all my blah, 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 and throw that online.
I was I had a moment of realization. It's the same issue. You're giving it more and more access to code, right? And this presents an issue for, back on the security and AI topic. I have a note here for Gator, exactly for Gator. You're giving it more and more access to code, and this is problematic for businesses because IP, blah blah blah. Unless the future is open source, and then the AI can just have access to all of the code all of the time. So all software should be open source, and then there isn't a privacy problem with software.
A great man.
Problem solved.
A great man told me, you can't be blackmailed if you're proud of it.
It's true. You could still be prosecuted.
Yeah, by the way, you are that great man who I first heard that from.
Yeah. You can't be blackmailed if you're proud of it. You can still be prosecuted.
All right.
So don't so keep that in mind.
All right. With that, actually, I'll have a parting shot for you. At what point would you give up for what OpenClaw can do or whatever it's called now? At what point would what feature would have to happen? Nothing in order for you to go, yep, I'm gonna allow it.
Let me put it this way. What you're describing is already happening with Windows. Everyone sees it happening. Microsoft is trying to turn Windows into the AI operating system machine that has access to all these things and make the digital assistant. And I think the internet by and large is going, great, it's the year of the Linux desktop. Because fuck that. I don't want that. I think AI has its applications. I think giving AI access to that level of my person, that is a fascist's wet dream. And I'm not okay with it. That's it.
Gator says it's all about data classification, and I would argue this is I think it's right. What data permission settings of what do I want to allow it to do? Mac and all of these other ones are adding this. You get those pop-ups saying, "Hey, do you want to allow this?" But my argument would be what is classified data? Most companies, PII is considered your name, your first and last name. That is PII for most companies. It's personally identifiable information. So, I have to allow, I would assume the AI should be fine with reading my name. What about things like your birth date, your family tree? Okay, well that's definitely private. Well, credit card information, that's fine because if it gets stolen, so it can make transactions on your behalf. There's this whole level of even useless pieces of data become more and more and more valuable.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pre-LLM issue, right? That's a pre-AI issue. We already pretty much understand that.
The bigger question I have is now that our cartoons can be used to do anything we want in the thumbnail, what should we do next with them?
That's a very dangerous question. Poolside glamour shots.
Ooh, recreate
You gotta.
iconic DEF CON photos with the cartoons.
You need to.
AST cell that does not include your photo. Just saying that if you were listening, I am not doing that one.
You might need to send your cartoon to the gym though.
It is true. All right, what do you got for parting shots?
That's it. That's it. I'm good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for joining us. And as always, hack on.